Well, hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you for joining us tonight, and we're glad to have you with us. We've got a full house, and we're happy to have you here. My name is Jonna Ward, and I'm the CEO of the Seattle Public Library Foundation. And I have to say, tonight is one of our most special nights because we're here with the Seattle Times for the Pictures of the Year night. And if you've experienced this before, you know we'd typically be in the auditorium at Central, but instead we have this amazing format through Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. Welcome to all of you. And we're going to be able to share with you and share with so many more people than typical. Now, we have a long partnership with the Seattle Times, special programming. They've been a media sponsor. We've done a lot of interesting things over the years. And tonight, this is hosted by the Seattle Public Library Foundation. That's my organization. And if you don't know us, we are the nonprofit arm or sector partner to the library, and we provide a way for people to support the library through contributions as well as advocacy, all so that we can enhance the library and make it as special as Seattle Public Library is. So thank you to our donor family. And of course, any of you who would like to join the donor family, we'd have you in a second. Now, with private support, 1 out of every 4 items in the library's collection is purchased with support from donors. And thousands of programs are sponsored and made possible. And in fact, Gary, Connie, Cunis, you're here tonight. They are key sponsors to many of our humanities programs and our author series programs. So all things that we enjoy to bring to you. And of course, there's things like improvements to the buildings and such. So all of that said, we are glad to have you here. And to get things started, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about how this will all work. First off, Zoom tools, for those of you with us on Zoom, use the chat window if you want to have any technical issues, for instance, and want help from our stellar foundation team who will be here to help you. That button should be either at the bottom if you're using a laptop or a desktop, or at the top of your screen if you're on a phone or a tablet. And my team, like I said, will be there to help. Now, we have an opportunity for a lot of questions tonight, and so use the Q&A box if you want to put a question forward to our guests. And then the other thing I just want to say is we've got the luxury of having live captioning tonight. And this is thanks to the library's Equal and Access program. And if you want to use that, you can find that service by clicking on the closed caption, and then you can say show subtitles, or reverse it, of course, if you want to shut them off. Let's see. One last thing to just say, we're going to, in a second, I'll introduce our chief librarian. And then we have a pre-recorded session for you tonight. And then once the pre-recorded session is done, then we're going to bring our special guests on for a live Q&A. And so stick around. And with that, I just want to welcome our chief librarian and executive director of the library, Marcellus Turner. There he is. Hi.
Thank you, Jonna. I'm so pleased to join hundreds of fans of the Seattle Times, supporters of the foundation, and patrons of the Seattle Public Library alike for this evening's event. The library has enjoyed a fruitful and like-minded relationship with the Seattle Times, and we're thrilled to see robust journalism continue in our community. I've come to this every year since I've been here, and I can't wait to see what they have in store for us this evening, along with the 940 other people who are watching with us. Before I hand it off to the Times, I'd like to offer a few updates on the latest at the library. I'm excited to announce the latest expansion of curbside services at branch libraries across the city. The Magnolia and Northgate libraries are now open for patrons to pick up holds and return books 3 days per week. 6 locations are expanding their curbside service from 3 to 5 days per week. They are Ballard, Broadview, Douglas Truth, Lake City, Beacon Hill, and Southwest. And additional libraries will now offer service for returns only: Queen Anne, South Park, and West Seattle. Please visit spl.org/curbside for more information on the services offered near you. 9 locations also now offer free printing service. This is great for people who have relied on the library for printing a resume, a letter, or an important document. For more on that, visit spl.org/ print. And finally, the whole limit has expanded from 25 items back to the original 50 items we offered pre-pandemic. Our dedicated staff continues to work hard to meet the community's needs safely. We have appreciated your patience and goodwill, and we are committed to making our services more convenient and accessible as we are able. Now, we at the library are so honored that the Seattle Times continues to share its work and insights with us. While the photojournalists at the Times have documented the pivotal events of our state for generations, the past year has served to be transformative in many ways, and we have relied on credible news sources to deliver sober news and help us understand our ever-changing world. Just here in Seattle, we were the nation's first epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic. Our residents rose up to form one of the most visible front lines of the Black Lives Matter movement, and the way we live, converse, and understand the world has changed radically, all while journalists put their safety and well-being at risk to bring us the truth, all while that truth suffered constant attacks from folks of all political persuasions. The library and the Times hold shared values of education, enlightenment, information, and justice, and we firmly believe that each of these values advance democracy and enrich our community. It is my great pleasure to introduce the hardworking team of photojournalists at the Seattle Times. And I will now hand it off to Danny Golaski, Assistant Managing Editor at the Times, who will kick off our program and introduce us to his intrepid team. Thank you, Danny, and thank you to everyone for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Marcellus. I can't say how much I miss being with you in the library this year, but like all things in 2020, we've had to adapt. I'm thankful to the Seattle Public Library, as well as each of you in the audience for adapting with us. Welcome to our Pictures of the Year event. This was a very different year for photojournalism. As the pandemic started, we quickly shifted our priorities. Our focus was to keep our photo and video journalists safe and to make sure that we kept the people we met with safe. It's been a scary and turbulent time, but we knew that journalism was more important now than ever. And so even as we abandoned our newsroom and learned how to create a newspaper and news site remotely, even as we became importers of safety supplies that we had never even heard of previously, we knew we had to keep doing our job. We needed to inform our communities and our policymakers to help keep people safe. As we focused on that core mission, on keeping our staff and our community safe from this pandemic, we knew that the quality of our photography, it might suffer. And we were okay with that. But looking back, I am inspired to see the work that our staff produced. It's likely more important than any work I've seen in my lifetime. This year, I am particularly proud to present the Seattle Times Pictures of the Year. It has been a really, really intense year. I want to thank all of our staff photo and video journalists for all their work this year. And in particular, I want to thank Amanda Snyder for her work in editing that. You will have the chance tonight to hear from all of them as they talk about their work in 2020. And we'll also have some time at the end for your questions that you post in the chat. First, I want to hear from Ellen Banner. Ellen was at the Life Care Center in Kirkland when we first learned about the first COVID deaths in this country. Ellen, can you tell us what you remember from those early weeks?
I got an assignment to go to Kirkland to the Life Care Center to cover the coronavirus because they said that there had been some case, 4 people had passed that day. And I went there not really knowing what to expect. And there was a bunch of photographers all standing sort of far apart under trees, and it was raining, and we're all staring at this facility. A good friend of mine, Ted Warren, he's a photographer with AP, and whenever I see him, we always give each other a hug, and he was just like, can't hug you, just don't know how bad this thing was. And I was just like, wow, I wasn't expecting it to grow bigger than the 4 people who had passed. And then within 4 weeks, 39 people at that facility had died from complications from COVID. And it just became this overwhelming nightmare. I just think people didn't really know what to expect or how to handle it, or if it was how it was really transmitted in the beginning. And it was surreal covering it in such a sea of unknown.
Ellen, what were some of the things that changed for your photojournalism, even in those early days?
Most of the time when we shot people, we didn't go inside their places or their residences or their places of work. So we would shoot people outside in front of their businesses. Our bosses gave us, protection. They gave us masks and gloves, and instantly everything sold out in the stores. And so we were fortunate in that regard. And on the other hand, we also had to go out in the world and take pictures, and we couldn't stay in our houses. It was just a scary time not knowing. It's like now we know so much more, wearing masks and washing your hands. And so in the beginning, it was really, really scary for me.
Thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for all of your work this year. Next, I want to introduce staff photojournalist Greg Gilbert. How you doing, Greg?
Doing fine, Danny. How are you?
Good. Greg, can you tell us about what it was like in those early days in February, March with the press conferences?
Yeah, I think the very, very first one was January 21st, I think. Do I have that right? Yeah, January 21st. And it was a crowded room, which later we all realized was probably not a good idea, but it was the very first discovered case of this COVID-19. And Jay Cook was describing the condition of the patient, but he was doing very well. He survived and was discharged, I think, within a week. Little did we know what was going to happen in the next 12 months from that one press conference.
And then, Greg, you went from that to covering some of the hospital response to coronavirus. What is it like working inside of a hospital during the pandemic?
First of all, when you enter Overlake Hospital, they check your temperature and they ask you a bunch of questions if you have a fever or a cough or anything. And then I was handed a mask and a shield. They wanted me to wear a shield over my whole face. So I was shooting through the shield as well as wearing a mask, which was a little challenging. So I was introduced to Rachel, who was an ICU nurse, and I had to stay behind a line and photograph her moving in and out of one of the ICU rooms. And she was tending to a patient there, a woman who did survive. Also, too, I photographed Dr. Jim Copeland, and I photographed him as kind of a portrait of him with his shield over his face and the helmet that they wear that produces positive airflow and keeps the virus from moving into their faces. So that was a little startling, but we all knew that this thing was dangerous.
And Greg, what are the challenges? Like, how has this year changed the photojournalism that you do?
Well, we're no longer in the newsroom now. There's no newsroom. Everybody is remote. And the fact that we don't see each other now, there's no gathering of anyone on this photo staff. There's 9 of us on the photo staff, and we don't see each other. We see their work. We see each other's work in the paper, but we don't have any close contact with anyone.
Well, thank you, Greg, and thank you for all the work that you're doing out there.
Oh, thank you, Danny.
Next, I want to introduce staff photojournalist Erica Schultz. Erica, with so many changes going on right now, what do you miss from your usual photojournalism?
I think one thing that's been really challenging for visual journalists is, getting close and spending time with community members. And, it is a gift, generally when anyone opens up their lives to us. And I think a lot of my favorite moments throughout the years has been through like spending time, in someone's living room, or, being with parents as they're tucking their kids to bed at night. And there's a lot of moments now that it's really challenging to document. I try to really limit my time indoors just to try to help with transmission. And we have to try to get as creative as possible. One story that was early on in the pandemic was working with Vince Viet Nguyen and his family. And Vince's father was diagnosed with COVID-19 and passed of COVID-19. And we, worked with him and his partner to be there for moments when they were having family prayers. And we photographed through their living room window, from a safe distance. For Vince and his family, it was really important to share, how important social distancing was at that point in time. And also, that the virus was real. I really appreciate the families, like the Khan family, who opened up their doors to me, as they were breaking fast during Ramadan, and I photographed them breaking fast through their patio doors. There's a drag performer, Betty Wetter, who let me sit at her apartment window while she was conducting a performance. I also think about, I've thought a lot about connection this last year, and I really appreciate, being able to document moments where, a couple who's been married for 60 years, meets every day, at the retirement community, to seeing teenagers activate with the Pacific Islander Association of Washington, and they are powering their food distribution sites. There's a lot of beautiful moments that are still happening. It's, now we're just trying to see how we can, film and photograph those from a distance.
What else do you think that people really need to know about being a photojournalist right now?
I really appreciate our staff and the local journalists that have been doing work and national journalists that have been doing work this year, because it's been scary and stressful. And, a lot of visual journalists have been showing really important images that, that informs legislation, that informs, safety, that shows us inside of hospitals, that shows us extremely important demonstrations that are happening for racial justice. And I think it's been a really important year for visual journalism, and to share what life is like for community members, in the United States.
Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you for all of your work this year. Next, I want to introduce Steve Ringman. Steve, so much of photojournalism is about relationships, but the pandemic has obviously really changed the way that we can interact with people. How are you making things work right now?
Well, it's almost like it's, as everyone has gone through in 2020, it's what's lacking, what they have missed in relationships. And key for people in journalism, in newspapers, are the relationships that they have with their coworkers. And that's very, very, very missing that we have. I mean, we miss, I so miss working with reporters and editors, and sitting down next to my favorite colleague, Alan Berner, in the office and talking about photos and all the experiences that we have and should be having. So that aside, the missing part, the relationship became very, very different as far as being behind the camera, and having your subject matter being further away and them being outdoors, the relationship wasn't there. It was so hard. It was so stunted that it was difficult. And you'd pull up to an assignment and you would call them and they would come down. You couldn't see their environment. All those things are important when you are a photojournalist, because lots of those things say more about a picture. So that was different.
Steve, obviously our focus for 2020 was just getting through it safely and keeping other people safe. But when you look back over your work and the staff's work this year, what do you see?
Well, I mean, I think that our work this year really reflected all the small and large crises that are going on in the world right now, and in Seattle especially, with all the protests and the homeless and the politics. And I mean, there was a lot to take pictures of. Honestly, it's been a tumultuous year to be a photographer. And I mean, our staff is incredible, and it really reflected in pictures of the year this year. And I think it surprised everyone how good our photos were this year from 2020. So
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you for all of your work this year. Seattle changed a lot over the course of 2020, and photojournalist Amanda Snyder was assigned to document some of that change. Amanda, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good, thank you. Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about your process? What was it like trying to document how Seattle was changing, and particularly how quiet things were getting during the pandemic?
Yeah, so originally, kind of sort of in the beginning of March, I was tasked with taking some pictures of how Seattle was changing, and a lot of that was happening downtown. And so me and the photo editor, Fred Nelson, was also talking about like what normally happens. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna photograph traffic, and at 5 o'clock, I mean, there were just no cars, and it was just a strange scene. And I remember walking into a grocery store and all the toilet paper was gone. And so I'm starting to see these scenes and I'm thinking, wow, Seattle is changing fast. I mean, the events were getting canceled, like libraries were getting closed, and this was happening like every single day. Playgrounds were getting kind of wrapped up, and these are strange scenes at the time. And I mean, even now looking at it, it's sort of strange. And then kind of like visiting churches. I mean, usually there's a ton of people in churches, and now it's just like these video calls with people, and things are still trying to be normal, but it just is such a strange thing to photograph things that are not normal. And just kind of, I think I remember also going into every single one of these spaces, and this is what everyone is talking about. I mean, I couldn't go somewhere without overhearing conversation about, did this just shut down? Or like, what are you doing? Are you talking to people? And I thought that was like, this was when I was starting to realize it was going to happen for a long, long, long time.
And so for you, what is it like being a witness to all of these changes happening in Seattle?
I mean, a lot of pressure, but also I just think it's important to be able to document these moments. And it meant a lot to me as a photographer going through this. I remember people were bunkered down and nobody was coming out of their houses, but I still left the house every day to take pictures. And I would come home and my roommates at the time would be like, what happened? What's happening out there? And because they weren't leaving. And it was kind of being that firsthand response to sort of what is happening. And even with the reporters too, sort of being that, eyewitness to things was, I don't know, it was important. And I'm glad that I was able to kind of take those pictures and share that with the public and help be that sort of eye to the public.
Thank you, Amanda. Mike Siegel has been a staff photographer at the Seattle Times for 34 years and has seen a lot of change. Mike, in addition to this changing the way that we work with people and the way that we make photos, it's also really changed the way that we transmit and edit photos. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the changes that you've seen over the years and this year in particular?
Absolutely. So back in the 80s, when I started working, everything was about film, and no matter what we did or where we went to photograph, no matter how far away it was, we would always have to end up at Fairview and John, because that's where our darkrooms were. And we had individual rooms where we would process our film. And we had this dryer where we would strip the film up and hang it up in the dryer and wait for it to get dry. And then we go in the dark room and make prints after we edited the film. So no matter what, we would always have to spend a third of our day in the dark room.
What is it like now, Mike? I mean, normally you would transmit from coffee shops or from the office, but all of that is closed. How are you transmitting photos now?
Well, I do a lot of my work from where I'm sitting right now, the front seat of my car. I have a Verizon Wi-Fi device, and I put that on my dashboard, and I do probably 50% of my processing and editing and downloading right from where I'm at right now, right in the front seat of the Subaru. So as long as I can get a signal, I download and I transmit right from here, no matter where I'm at. So unlike film, where we had to get back to the newspaper, no matter where I photograph news from, or whether it's wherever the event is, I just need to get back to my car and send pictures from there.
Mike, you're retiring this year after, frankly, a really amazing career at the Seattle Times, a really amazing career in photojournalism. When you look back over the decades, how are you going to remember this year? How will this year be different?
It's been challenging. It has been, it's almost like reinventing the wheel. Usually I have a variety of lenses with me, and I've done more telephoto photography than I ever have in my life. Being a photographer, we always have to be creative to try to capture people's personality. Still have to try to do that, but doing it safely.
Well, thank you, Mike. Congratulations on your retirement. And Mike, I just want to thank you on behalf of the Seattle Times, as well as our audiences, for all of the work that you've done. And, you know, you've been photographing here for much longer than I've been at the Seattle Times. And I just want to thank you. It's hard to imagine a Seattle Times without you.
Thank you, Danny.
We've talked a lot about distance and, you know, that extra social distancing that we need to do in order to keep each other safe. But staff photojournalist Ken Lambert kind of took that to a whole new level with drone photography. Ken, can you tell us a little bit about the drone photography that you did this year?
Yeah, Danny, you know, you got me this drone back in 2019. And I want to say it was like one of the nicest holiday gifts I ever got, you know, because I got it in December, and I got my license in December, and I started flying right away. And I hope I returned the favor, because for the $500 you spent out of your budget, that would have only gotten us two helicopter rides. So what we got was a lot more. You know, it was really all about access. This was when the school system was shut down. We weren't allowed to go into this school district transportation center. So basically, we just found a public street and put the drone up. A lot of the early drone photos kind of just showed emptiness. We proactively went and did stadiums like T-Mobile, and then this at the time was CenturyLink. And then we got the UW Stadium complex. And we got these early on because we knew that there was just going to be continuous stories relating to COVID. But then we also got photos like this aerial of food collection, and just tried to give a different perspective. What's really interesting about looking at Seattle from above is you kind of don't know necessarily what the picture is until you get up there. I didn't know that the balloon was going to go up until I was actually up there. When I photographed the Ballard Locks, I didn't know that I was going to get a big gravel barge in my photo. You know, just lots of interesting aerial perspective. Schultz Bay Marina. This guy was raking leaves, which was pretty cool. You know, I made contact with him and I told him what I was doing. And then I put the drone up and just waited to see what would happen. Emerald Downs. I wish the horses had been closer, but that's not what happened. It showed the empty stands though. Somebody climbing on the rock wall at UW. This is an interesting photo, this sunset shot. People think, well, you can't fly a drone at night, and I can't, but there's something called civil twilight, which because I'm a FAA certified pilot, and I took a test, I know that I can fly within half an hour of either sunrise or sundown, and this fit within that half an hour. What's great about the drone is it just gives you access to see over fences and things you can't normally see. So this is the pier collapse. And this is the Black Lives Matter primer paint before it was painted. We didn't get the painting by deadline, but then we went back the next couple days and got more photos of it painted and from different perspectives. This is a demonstration at City Hall. I can't fly over people, but I can fly to the side of people and show the crowd size. This is another protest photo. It shows this technique of circling cars and bicycles to protect the people doing a sit-in. And then lastly, I'll just end with what I thought I was going to be using a drone for, which was real estate photography. You can actually see Mount Rainier when you put the drone up, whereas you really can't from the ground. And that's it. That's the drone in my first year. I really appreciate you getting it for me, Danny. And all I can say is you spent more on me at holiday time than my parents ever did. So thank you.
Thanks, Ken, and yeah, happy belated holidays. In 2020, we also had a major presidential election, and staff photographer Alan Berner documented it. Alan, what was it like covering a presidential election this year?
It was tough. Coverage for the presidential election was tough because you didn't have candidates coming out and didn't have large gatherings. So it came to a head on November 7th. With the declaration by the AP and then other media following suit, declaring the Biden-Harris ticket to be the winner. And we had a lot of people ready to go. 4 photographers, 3 videographers, 4 writers hit the street. I have no idea how many more were working remotely. And we were looking for any signs of jubilation or something that would address that. There were a individual here and there around town as we drove around, but really knew that if there was going to be a celebration of size, it would be on Capitol Hill, and it would be after people had their morning coffee and gathered, and that's exactly what happened on Pine Street mainly. People were dancing, exuberance. People were driving by honking slowly because there was only one lane available on the outside of the dancers. People were yelling, "No more years." People were chanting, "No more years" out of their cars. So it was a jubilation. I mean, it was really exuberant.
You know, Alan, I'm just thinking, I mean, it has just been such a tough year. What's keeping you motivated right now? What keeps you going out there?
I don't know. That's what I do. That's what we do. As journalists, you know, you want to immerse yourself in. I always think of even the little things we cover, not the big things, but the little things. They become part of the history, and we're historians, visual historians. But even the little things, you know, I think in terms of what we're doing as a record of the city, especially now, that'll be looked upon in the past as being a really important document. I hope so. And that's a collective document made by the staff. You know.
Thank you for that, Alan. And thanks for taking the time to talk. And moreover, thanks for all of your work this year.
No, this has been good. This is good. Thanks, Danny. It's just good talk.
Everything was different in 2020, and that includes the Seahawks season. Staff photojournalists Bettina Hansen and Dean Rutz covered this incredibly different Seahawks season this year. Dean, Bettina, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, Danny. Hi, Dean.
So you've been in the stadiums covering Seahawks this year, but obviously it's really, really different. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like covering football this year?
It is really strange to be in the stadium all by ourselves. When I watched the games on TV, I found that it felt very similar. It really felt the same because the crowd noise was played at a much higher level on TV. But when we were in the stadium, it felt really empty. I think the athletes suffered the most too with football. I mean, it feels to me like at least by the end of the season, the players and the coaches got a lot better at kind of amping themselves up, Whereas in the beginning, it seemed like, I mean, every game felt like a scrimmage in the beginning. And it was really difficult to get that level of intensity that we are used to seeing with the Seahawks.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the players would be the first to tell you they missed the 12th man. They didn't like playing in quiet. They're all pros and they knew what they were playing for, but they really missed the crowd noise. And that's why all the stadiums were trying to pipe in sound.
Yeah, but the piped in noise was only 70 decibels, which
Yeah,
is half of what, we're used to hearing.
it's a combination of the stadium being empty and us being in the stands to shoot. It changes the angle. It changes the look of the picture. Suddenly that colorful crowd that you used to have in the background doesn't exist. Or because you're in the stands, if you're in the north end zone, you were up pretty darn high because that wall sits above suites. So you never really saw anything but the field, which on some level made the pictures look better than having an empty stands. But it also changed the viewer experience because you're looking at a slightly elevated image now that you're not quite used to. The beauty in sports photography of being low to the ground is that it separates the athlete from the turf. And you'd have guys when they're running, their feet are not touching the grass, and you can see that. It gives you that sense of motion and speed and athleticism. Whereas when you're up high and you're compressing the grass to the players, it lacks some of the same appeal and punch that we might have had we been on the field.
Yeah, I look back at some of our pictures from 2019. I was editing that season because I was pregnant. And I look back at some of the takes and I was just like, wow, these pictures are way more dynamic. Whereas now we can really get some incredible, very clean angles, very interesting stuff that I never, was seeing. But yeah, it's much more difficult to get something that looks truly dynamic and really, really deep.
And I think the other thing that was particularly difficult for us, and Bettina, see if you agree, it was the fact that we were in the stands changed the lens options that you had. Everything became enormously long throws, stuff that we really have never encountered before. We were using lenses with teleconverters just to get any kind of reach that we could get. You were trying to replicate the experience of being on the field. And, the way we tend to shoot the game focuses a lot on faces and, torso up, we tend to shoot very tight. There was no tight when you're shooting, a 600 millimeter lens with a teleconverter and you're still loose.
Yeah. I think that, this is a really unique opportunity for us to shoot basically a whole season without any fans. I don't think it'll ever happen again, hopefully, but I did kind of enjoy the novelty of it all. I found that like the athletes, it was difficult for me to focus sometimes because I would forget that we'd be like on a third down play, that's like really big because you're used to taking the audio cues from the fans to help you focus on what's happening. And I think that us and the players both kind of struggled with that.
Well, thank you both for all of your work. I just really appreciate everything that you're doing.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Love working with Dean.
Oh, Bettina's the best. All right, thank you. See you guys. See you, B. See you, Danny.
See you, Dean. See you, Bettina. Next, I want to introduce our Seattle Times video journalists, Lauren Frone, Corinne Shin, and Ramon Downpour. But first, I want to introduce their work. This is the Seattle Times Videos of the Year.
It's wild that like overnight, all of these things were just like, well, that's not going to happen.
Everybody's panicked about it.
Having, things like alcohol wipes, that whole section in the grocery store is completely empty.
Right now, we're so isolated. And I'm afraid that this might cause a lot of mental illness for people, a lot of depression. We don't know when it's going to be over.
He's at Monroe Correctional Complex, and he was just bawling, crying on the phone, saying, if I get this, Mom, I'm going to die. And I haven't heard from him since.
It's just so sad to see patients not getting any better. Their family is unable to see them, and we are everything that they have for the moment.
They allowed 2 people in the ICU. It's my mom and my sister. We weren't able to be in the room, but at least we were able to be close by.
People think that this coronavirus is nothing or it's not real. We lost my 2 sisters and my mom. Just too much pain. Just too much pain.
It's my parents' first grandchild. They're not going to be able to come over and hold the baby.
I didn't imagine that I would be doing so much in this pregnancy alone. I don't want to be the only one to hear baby's heartbeat.
The good thing about this pandemic is that it really showed us this is what the community should be like.
Por eso es satisfactorio darlo, porque yo lo viví, yo sé lo que se siente cuando uno recibe algo que necesita.
Small businesses are someone's livelihood. Small businesses are someone's hopes and dreams for providing better for their family.
Ever since the shutdown of the bike place, we've had nowhere to sell our flowers.
My parents have been through worse. They were refugees from the Vietnam War, so I think we'll get through this.
Of we want a better system, we want a better way about things. Man, I mean, that's part and parcel of our history right here. Thousands of people came through here just because they wanted to be around people who felt the same way.
This is a long-term battle, a long-term war. We have not won anything by being here.
I don't see no right here, take off your right here. I don't see no right here, take off.
We give police officers much more power and authority than we give many or most or all other professions.
When I was 16, a police officer here in Seattle, morally wrong, killed my uncle for no reason. Everyone says, man, you look just like John. And it's not something I'm trying to hear every day.
If someone in your family was taken by a cop, all your heart and soul, you're going to go through heartache, memories you can't stop. You're going to deal with hatred, rage. It's a side of you you've never been in the level of.
Say his name! Say his name!
My brother died the same way as so many others. Like Trayvon Martin, my brother was just walking from the store. Like George Floyd, my brother said that he couldn't breathe.
It's the worst thing that could ever happen to a parent. You have to look at your boy in that casket.
You're not going to be able to bury your child in Babyland because we don't, bury minority children.
My father was a police officer, and he still couldn't get justice for his child.
Cuando mi mamá se me murió, a mí me decían que era huérfana. Cuando mi esposo se me murió, yo quedé viuda. Pero se me han muerto mis hijas y no tienen nombre.
It's hard now with the border being closed. We haven't been able to see each other for over 200 days. The only possible way that I can be with her now is if I marry her.
If we hadn't met each other, our lives, especially during quarantine, would just be so bland and boring. A big part of what makes us human and what keeps society running is being able to socialize with other people.
I'm Lauren Frohn, and I'm joined by my colleagues Corinne Chin and Ramon Dampour. And what you just watched is a compilation reel of many of our video stories and video work from throughout the year. You know, a bit overwhelming to watch in retrospect. How does it feel for each of you guys?
I still get, a little bit emotional seeing all the things that we went through this past year. Even though we lived through it, everybody lived through it, right? It wasn't just us as journalists.
One of the pieces from the pandemic that was so incredibly moving to me was the piece Lauren did with the Wynn family.
And I worked on it with Nina Shapiro and photographer Erica Schultz, and this was in March. And so it was very early on when, lockdowns were starting to happen, and we were just figuring out how we do our jobs. And I filmed them outdoors from a distance. At one point we were filming and photographing through the front windows of their house to sort of get those sort of intimate moments of the family praying together. And I used a lot of video footage from the family because they had access to the hospital where I could not go. And it was also an exploration in how to tell such a deeply personal story while never getting within like 20 feet of someone. And so one thing I really appreciate about our team is we've taken our precautions very seriously. As community storytellers, our priority is keeping our communities and ourselves safe. And so, we don't cut corners. And at the same time, we're still trying to tell very thoughtful, deep, personal, character-driven stories, even though there was just a deluge of news related to the pandemic and then around the protest movement that emerged.
It became breaking news story after breaking news story after breaking news story. And I think that for us as a team, we really wanted to take a step back and take a look at the bigger picture of what this meant. Why were people going out in these huge numbers in the middle of a pandemic? And we wanted to bring you, our audiences, that story and not just cover things in a reactive way. Let's do something a little more in-depth, especially with two of us on the team being people of color and two of us being women. I think that we all know what it feels like to feel underrepresented in media, to not see yourself, and, how that makes you perhaps feel like your perspective is less valid. And so it's always been really important for us in the video team to spotlight underrepresented voices. We're all active members of our newsroom's diversity and inclusion task force. And so that's just something we're really mindful of when we choose stories, whether they're about something as serious as the pandemic or protests, or whether they're about things that are lighter.
With so much happening throughout the year, we had to learn to kind of pace ourselves in order to keep from burning out. And that, that's something that everyone had to do. People had these small moments of joy, of excitement and community. Earlier in the year, I met families that built these fun working Star Wars droids together from scratch. I filmed a beautiful wedding at the Canadian border with an international couple that was separated by the COVID-19 pandemic after not seeing each other for months. I saw people work to supply groceries and PPE for their communities. Farmers and restaurant owners donated their crops and food to thousands of families when the pandemic disrupted their businesses. And we saw people encourage each other in finding new ways to cope, whether it was through online classes, through shows, or through new hobbies like roller skating or cycling. It was a really tumultuous and difficult year, but it also brought out a lot of beauty in everyone, and we didn't want that to get lost.
We're looking forward to telling more stories this year, and I think 2020 has prepared us for just about anything this year can throw at us. So thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Corinne. And thank you, Ramon. And thank you so much for all of your work throughout this year. Next, we are going to take some time to answer questions. And for that, I'm going to hand it back to Jana.
And we do have some questions coming in. And I'm going to start by trying to get a little bit situated. But, I have two things while I'm getting questions pulled up. First off, I think Mike deserves a Subaru commercial, first off. And on top of that, I think that, right? And then I think pulling in the videos has been a game changer for really an extension of this event beyond just the idea of pictures. And in fact, with that, Danny, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pull up the questions as well. I think Meredith is one of the first ones in there. And while you're doing that, I'm going to try to get my screens to cooperate and get the right stuff in front of me. So.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and address Meredith's question. Meredith asked, as print newspapers have been suffering for the lack of readership and advertisers for years, is there any silver lining to the need to pivot to online access? And since photography lends itself so well to online media, have you been able to keep employing all of your photographers? Well, thank you, Meredith, for that question. The Seattle Times is a subscriber-based news company. And yes, it is true that it's been a tough time for print media. But, as for how we're able to do this journalism and how we're able to keep photojournalists employed, that's because of you. When you subscribe to the Seattle Times, whether that's print, online, however you receive us, that supports our journalism. And as for a silver lining of being printed online, when I think of that, particularly in times like this with the pandemic, I am just really, really proud that we can get news to people, whether you need it instantly on your phone or if you want to see it in print. Maybe you don't have internet access, we can still deliver a print product. But yeah, whether we're in your email inbox with newsletters and on your phone and on your computer, in times particularly like this with the pandemic, I'm really proud that we can get news to our community, both online and in print.
All right. There's a couple questions that are coming in related to PPE and keeping your photographers safe, especially when they're out in the field. Where'd you get it? How'd you find it? And how did that all work out? Did everyone stay healthy?
Yeah, well, Corinne was key in helping us find some of the PPE that we used. One of the real problems at the beginning of the pandemic was that we needed to not just find PPE, but find it in a way that wasn't depriving health and medical personnel and first responders from equipment. And so we ended up finding a supplier in Shanghai that provided very close to medical grade equipment, but equipment that couldn't be used in hospitals. And so that was shipped actually directly to my house. And then we distributed that to the journalists on staff as well as the delivery workers for the Seattle Times. And that's a lot of the way that we stayed safe. Bettina, Ken, Corinne, do you want to talk about the safety equipment that you used?
Well, I think you getting us the masks was just critical, and we got hand sanitizer, and we just kept everything in our car. And, I think it was just absolutely critical to just get us used to it, because on my very first assignment where I wore a mask, I remember I just found something in my basement and was using that was like years old from painting something. So when the PPE started flowing to us with instructions on how to use it, it was great.
Yeah, toward the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know as much as we do now, just like Ellen said in that presentation, we didn't know about surface transmission. And so, you know, a lot of us worked together to get supplies to keep each other safe. I think, was it Greg Gilbert who got us the sanitizing alcohol from the glass distillery? And we were spraying all of our gear with that after every assignment. You know, I was taking stuff off before I went inside my home just because we didn't know. And if we had to hand things off to each other, you know, we would leave it on the ground and walk away if we just needed to pass equipment back and forth. So it was all a really scary time, but it's really important, I think, to recognize the collective effort because there was so much confusion around masks at the beginning. And I want to also give a shout out to the International Women's Media Foundation and my friend Jin Ding in particular, who connected us with that mask supplier and who connected countless other journalists across the country with masks.
Wow.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. One of the things that we've all had to get used to too is photographing with a mask on, which you don't really think about until you're doing it. So I've learned to kind of hold my breath while I'm photographing. Otherwise, you completely fog up the viewfinder.
All these practical things, right? These practical things. There's a lot of questions about videos and access to videos and where are you using them? How are you using them? Do you want to talk more video?
Yeah, Corinne, do you want to take that?
Sure. We have we've been doing video at the Seattle Times. I don't know how many years, Dan, you would know, but we do a lot of short films. And what you saw was really a compilation of a lot of the short films that we produce. If you go to seattletimes.com/video, you can take a look at a lot of other stories that we've touched on. And I'm realizing here, seeing all your questions, that not all of you may be online users, but I would definitely recommend checking out the website because there's so much great work that is on our website that you don't see in the print paper. It's not just the video team, it's also our engagement editors who are working with audiences and interacting with them. And I think there's a lot of great work online.
Yeah, Meredith asked about the silver lining of our online journalism, and I would say that our exceptional video storytelling and interactives and audience engagement, that is most definitely one of those silver linings and one of the places that we have just continued to really innovate.
All right, let's see. There's more technical things mixed in, and it's fun to see everyone's comments. I hope we're going to get through as many as we can. Here's a question though about how do our viewers tonight, or any of your readers, get with photos to understand the aperture and shutter speed and ISO information, things like that? Is that something that's ever shared, or is that like metadata on pictures on the web or anything like that?
Ken, could you quickly go through all the photos that we saw tonight and name the aperture that each one was photographed at?
Yeah, I'm just going to need a couple of minutes. I think the question is, could somebody see a picture and look up the data? And I don't think that's possible. They would have to actually have the file, and they would have to then take it into like a Photoshop program to look at it. But a lot of what we're doing is just trying to photograph at a fast enough shutter speed, give enough light, make sure that we don't have any blur, and have decent depth of field if we need it, or lack of depth of field if we need it. And that's pretty intuitive.
And kind of down that same vein, there's questions around what kind of equipment do you have on your drone?
Oh, the drone is a Mavic Mini, which just has one wide angle lens. And I can do either video with it or stills. And a lot of times I'll be going to a still assignment, and then, Corinne will actually call me and say, hey, I see that you're going to go cover the mural again on Capitol Hill for Black Lives Matter. Can you get 5 seconds of video? And I'll just, after I do the stills, I'll then go back and forth and get some video. So it's all about teamwork and just communicating. And the drone is very basic.
Now, here's our topic of the hour, and that is related to the distribution of vaccines. How do you think about covering something like that that's happening in the moment, and talk a little bit about that?
Well, go ahead, Ken.
Well, I just had my very first and last vaccine assignment on Sunday, and you're pretty much playing by their rules. It's you know, you get in touch with Amazon and their public relations person, and then you're just following all their directions. As to, you know, like it was the very first time I ever put on a shield. They gave me a shield to put on. So the most challenging thing for me is with my glasses that then fog up and I can't wipe them because I've got a shield on, and then the camera is also fogging up. So that's been the most challenging part. So what I'm doing is just a lot of pictures that I can't even see. I'm just hitting the autofocus button. And then when I go to edit them, I go, oh, great. You know, this one's good, that one's good. And that's what I do.
Okay, I think you've just answered the question as to what Ken's most difficult picture is, because you can't see it. But how about the rest of you? What is the picture that you think was most difficult to take technically, emotionally?
I think for me, the harder ones are always emotionally difficult. I'm not much of a gear person. We always get these questions every year, but it really, if you get the moment, that makes the photo. It doesn't matter if you took it on your iPhone. It doesn't, and we did a lot with our phones actually with video this year. But yeah, you know, that the gear all kind of fades away. And for me, this has just been a really hard year because almost every story I've worked on has been about death. At the very least, about really intense and personal pain. And we live in this community. We are community members as well. So to have to work through that and, you know, just walk with our neighbors in their pain and suffering has been really challenging. And to sometimes, you know, for me, I'm doing a lot of video interviews, as you heard. To have to ask them to relive it is really difficult. So I don't know if I can even pick one, just because everything, almost everything that rose to the level of we need to cover this has been incredibly challenging. But certainly talking to people who've lost loved ones to COVID, especially when we then have to go and cover things where people are protesting mask usage or telling people that this virus is not real. That is a really painful thing to witness.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, for me, the two things that are the hardest things to photograph are things that when you're in physical danger and when you're in real emotional pain. The two things that come to mind are the story we did about a Black family who was not allowed to bury their child in a white cemetery, North Seattle, and were apologized to. And doing a protest where it was a protest in July where there was fires set, there was flashbangs, there was, you know, all sorts of chemical deterrents used. And when you're trying to protect your own physical safety, you put everything else on autopilot and you're not thinking about aperture and shutter speed. You're just trying to think, how do I get what shows the situation and how do I keep myself safe? And that was something that, you know, there was a lot of questions asked about safety gear, and we really, I really credit it to Danny and Corinne specifically for stepping up our safety gear game this year as far as getting respirators and body armor and all sorts of different things.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. There's lots to all of that. Another area that I guess it's a serious question and an important question is there were comments and questions related to diversity amongst photographers and from your staff. And I suspect that could be broader than just within the Seattle Times, but across journalism and photography. Can one of you speak to that? And Corinne, I know you touched on it in the video earlier.
Yeah, I think I'll let Danny speak about our photo staff in particular, but we definitely have been having a longer conversation at the Seattle Times of what it means to truly be diverse, to be equitable and inclusive. And I think that in the past, I would say 4 or so years, we've really tried to put in place some systematic measures on helping all of our journalists become more educated on these topics. So you know, some of you who might follow media might have been aware that 2020 caused a lot of racial reckonings in media organizations across the country and organizations of every kind across the country. And so I do think we were a little more prepared to handle those really, really difficult conversations. That's not saying they were easier at all. They're still really difficult, and they always will be, and they're really, really complicated. But we definitely recognize at the Seattle Times that our staff needs to reflect the communities we cover in order to just be fair and accurate and balanced journalism.
Yeah, in my time at the Seattle Times, I've seen a consistent commitment to diversity in our coverage as well as in our staffing. And I am really proud to work with Corinne, and that she's on the video team, but also at the head of our diversity and inclusion efforts. And so, you know, we know that we will continue to have work on to do on this, and we will continue to do that work.
You know, we're definitely past the hour, and I know questions are still coming in. I'm thinking though, each of you probably have something you want to say, or you've seen the questions. And is there something that we haven't touched on that you'd really like to share with our audience?
I just wanted to add one thing that, you know, a lot of readers are very on target to hold us up to questions just daily about the paper. But one thing, you know, that they should keep in mind when they don't see something is that it doesn't mean we didn't cover it. It doesn't mean that, you know, if they just were to get the newspaper itself, they're actually going to get pretty gypped on photography. You know, if they were to go back to that story online, they might see 10 or 15 more pictures that never made it into print. And it's one thing to, you know, look at the paper, but you might want to, you know, if you're really interested in something, explore the online version, because there might be a lot more photography and of course video.
Yeah, and I would also kind of piggyback off what Ken said. And, you know, if, you know, as a reader, if you think that we're not covering something correctly or as in depth as we should, I mean, we're all ears. I mean, we are, you know, we can't just necessarily change our coverage on a dime, but we are listening to the feedback. And I've been here for 9 years, and I feel like the old way was to just say, well, we know how we're doing. We know why, you know, journalism is this and we're doing this, and we're, you know, we're not going to change the way that we're doing it. And I think there's been a sea change in the last few years where we are changing a lot and fast, and we are listening a lot more than we ever used to. And, you know, I would say, if you don't agree with what we're doing, tell us. And, you know, we're actively working to change things that are unfair.
I'd echo Bettina. The only way that we can effectively hold the powerful accountable as an institution of journalism is if we also allow our audiences to hold us accountable. So please do that. And I think there were a lot of really great questions that, and some we didn't have time to get to today, that were the start of that. So I would say thank you for engaging in this conversation. Please continue it. And I guess I'll just end with saying, I just so appreciate having this staff to work with. And a lot of people had questions like, how do you get inspiration? How are you getting through this really difficult time? And it's completely by leaning on my colleagues who are here and who you heard from tonight. And even in isolation, knowing that I can hop on a Zoom or call them or wave at them from 6 or more feet away at my next assignment. That's really what's been sustaining me.
And yeah, I'm just struck, especially as I look over the work of the year, just such a deep, deep appreciation for our staff, for the photojournalists and the video journalists who, you know, continue to be out in the community, to take so many steps to keep people safe. I see so many questions about our financial model. And, you know, I just really appreciate that we are a local family-owned company. And, you know, that our local company decided to take the step that even though we are a subscription-based company, to make access to this work during this critical time. A lot of our critical pandemic resources were free for everyone because we knew that it is a core to our public service mission, and I appreciate that. And as I said previously, I really appreciate each of you. By subscribing to the Seattle Times, you support this work, and without you, we couldn't do this. So thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jana, for the library's support in this show. This is something that I look forward to every year, and I appreciate you and the library and MT so much. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a special night, and this is lovely programming. And you know, the idea around library as a setting, I think it all began because we have such a good projection system at Central Library, but it's turned into something that's very special. And I think even doing this remotely tonight this way, we have reached so many more people than we would have otherwise. And so that's pretty special. And so Julie, thank you to all of you for your great work and your great partnership. And one of the things I want to call out is part of this whole deal comes together because of Phil. Phil, you're out there heading in marketing department. Phil Rowe has been a key part of this. And the other thing I just want to mention, I think that the Seattle Times on a national level, your leadership work around Save the Free Press initiative, and it's a public service of the Seattle Times. I mean, that's a national leadership being shown right here from a local organization that is homegrown. And so you're leading the charge out there and helping us all appreciate and remember to appreciate what is so important to our democracy. So I just want to once again say thank you to all of you who are here tonight. Again, if you have any interest in joining our donor family to support the library and keep it as vibrant and amazing as it is, we'd love to have you join us. Things like, for instance, you can get to the Seattle Times, the whole run for all these years. It's been digitized. You can get that through the library, and you can get the Seattle PI. That's a brand new thing that you can get through the library. And you know, we're just glad to be able to be part of something like this tonight. So I think with that, I just want to say thank you to my team. Truly, this is kind of a big adventure for all of us, and it takes nerves of steel, and Brian has nerves of steel leading the charge here. And so with that, I just want to say thank you all and appreciate you being here tonight. And we'll do it next year.
Can I just end on one? Can I just say one thing?
Cool.
Mike Siegel, we love you. Happy retirement. We're going to miss you so much.
Happy retirement, Mike.
We're going to miss you, Mike.
And somebody wants to know why you don't have Wi-Fi at home. Might have to, there's your retirement present, huh? All right. Thank you all and have a great evening. Bye-bye.